Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. The newly released Palkia VSTAR League Battle Deck seems to be one of the best products recently for Pokemon players. I think this gives us a great starting point for newer players, but is also a deck that might be adapting going forward into the new Paldea Evolved set with some new introductions that we know are coming in the next few months. So this seems like a really good value product for players just getting into the game and can have some peace of mind that it will be useful going into the remainder of this season. So let's see what we get immediately out of the box. We get a 3-2 line of our main attacker, the Palkia V and V-Star. Then we have a few backup draw-based Pokemon, which is a really nice thing to get from the box, with the 3-3 line of Bibarel, as well as Radiant Greninja, which acts as an additional way to draw cards, but is also a fantastic attacker in the decklist as well, which I'll get onto in a moment. And then we get a couple of helpful basics with Manaphy and Hisuian Basculin. For getting into the game, we have a high count of Battle VIP Pass, Ultra Ball and Trekking Shoes, as well as a few bits here and there. Items are really important in this deck, of course, because we have a lot of Tutor in this deck list via the supporter Irida, which we get 4 copies of. This is really an all-star for water decks, because it allows us to tutor a water Pokemon as well as an item card. So this gives us great flexibility throughout the game, because we can cherry pick different pieces of our deck. We also have Melanie, which is a supporter which allows us to accelerate water energy from our discard pile to our V Pokemon. So in this case, it will be exactly Palkia V and V-Star that we will be using to accelerate energy, but that means we can have this relatively efficient attack cost of Subspace Swell being maintained throughout the game. So let's have a look at the core strategy then. Palkia V-Star does a lot all in one go. It's got 280 hit points, pretty chunky for a stage 1 Pokemon. That Subspace Swell attack does 60 base, plus 20 more for each of your benched Pokemon and your opponent's benched Pokemon. That means that with our own bench being full, we get to deal 160 base damage, but also, if the opponent's bench is full, it means we get to do 260. 260 damage is the maximum we can do with a Palkia V-Star in one go. Of course, the opponent is in control of how many Pokemon they put down to an extent, so we might be looking at more sort of two-shotting V-Max Pokemon, and sometimes even V-Star Pokemon, so oftentimes we're doing pretty reasonable damage, easily able to knock out single prizes, and looking to 2-hit KO the bigger threats in the game. We also have a fantastic V-Star power in Star Portal. It allows us to attach up to 3 water energy from our discard pile to our water Pokemon in any way that we like. That means we can instantly power up our own V-Star, but it also enables Radiant Greninja to be an excellent attacker. Moonlight Shuriken allows us to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon in order to deal 90 damage to 2 of our opponent's Pokemon. That could even be Pokemon on the bench, of course, so it can be a great way for a single prize Pokemon to take multi-prize knockouts, or it can set up damage for higher hit point V-Star and V-Maxes for follow-up Subspace Swells. The Radiant Greninja is excellent in the deck because it also offers the Concealed Cards ability, one of the best abilities on a basic Pokemon that we have in the game, allowing us to discard an energy from our hand in order to draw 2 cards. You might notice that these 2 Pokemon have great internal synergy because we want energy in our discard pile early anyway because of our V-Star power from Palkia and because of the Melanie supporter, which also requires water to be in the discard pile for us to activate. That being said, this deck naturally just is oozing with synergy. 2 great attackers in Palkia and Radiant Greninja helping us draw cards throughout the game that then enables this big V-Star power to get a whole bunch of energy into play all in one go, so that we should have a couple of threats powered up throughout the game. Let's have a look at the sort of weaker cards that I am going to be trimming out of the list that we get from the get-go. I believe that the Bibarel line, although being a very, very good card, doesn't necessarily need to be a 3-3 line. We do get diminishing returns from this sort of ability, because ultimately setting up that third Bibarel won't really change too much compared to having just 1 or 2 into play, and also we have to consider our other bench spaces being committed to different Pokemon. Also, the Hisuian Basculin with that Gather the Crew attack is quite slow, so I don't necessarily think we need to have this in the deck list. I'm also going to be trimming down a few of these trainer cards. I'm going to remove 1 of the 2 copies of Hisuian Heavy Ball, because it's really just a security blanket. You don't need many more than 1 copy in your deck. Trekking Shoes is also going to be chopped down to 2 copies because, again, we just have more important things to place into the deck list. Choice Belt is an interesting one because, of course, it does improve our damage output, and if our opponent's board is full and our own is full, we could attach a Choice Belt to actually hit 290 and knock out V-Star Pokemon, but currently in the format, that's only really helpful against the Mirror Match or Giratina V-Star, seeing as though Lugia, although it has 280 hit points, will often be using V-Guard Energy, and they can tutor these out the deck with their Archeops, so really we're already just out of range of most 2-prize Pokemon unless they haven't evolved yet. So I think we should focus on other things rather than just raw damage output from Choice Belt. Choice Belt is definitely getting hurt by the rule change of now being a tool card, so it's no longer searchable via Irida. Previously this was a staple in Palkia, but doesn't seem to be the case anymore. I'm also going to cut Clara and the Lake Acuity Stadium. This will make more sense when I tell you the different stadium that we're going to put into the deck, because Clara will become much less useful because we'll be lost zoning Pokemon. Also, I'm going to reduce the count of Boss's Orders, because we are going to be using this space for some different types of gusting. So with the cuts that I've mentioned on the right-hand side of the screen, we will be gaining 16 slots from this deck list to play with. Let's have a look at the upgrades that I want to introduce then. We'll start on the left-hand side of the screen with the Stadium cards, and I think Lost City is a really important one for us to have here to improve some crucial matchups. I've already mentioned that Radiant Greninja is a great single-prize attacking Pokemon, but Manaphy is a common include in a number of decks right now. So the solution is that we're going to use Lost City to gust and knock out a Manaphy, which then enables our Greninja to get into the mix later on in the game. So this Lost City is really important to enable our Greninja to be as effective as possible. We're also going to add Collapse Stadium in the deck as another great card to help out against Lost Zone Box. Because we are a pretty tanky 2-prize Pokemon, we can definitely sponge hits in the opening stages, and then simply use Collapse Stadium to take threats that are heavily damaged off of our board to sort of undo turns from our opponent. That's one of the main things that we have going for us, alongside the Judge Supporter, that we're also going to include into the deck list to make life more difficult for these Lost Zone decks that love to grow expansive hand sizes. I'm quickly going to substitute the Bidoof to add in the new 60 hit point one that has the bench protection inbuilt ability, which is definitely a helpful option. We will still have Manaphy in the deck list, but this is just one less thing that you need to search out in those opening turns, so I do feel like it is an upgrade. It also has a 1 less retreat cost, which is actually kind of handy when we're also going to be adding in the new Mysterious Tail Mew here, which allows us to look at the top 6 cards and find an item and put it directly into our hand. Just having a pay retreat option of this Bidoof into that Mew makes it a lot more of a usable card. Luminion V is going to come in just to add some extra consistency to the deck, allowing us to tutor for a different supporter card, and again, we're going to be more flexible with our supporters overall, adding in these judges now and having a few other key pieces. Having access to Roxanne on a crucial turn is always really important, so Luminion giving us a ball searchable means of finding the supporter that we want is definitely a nice upgrade here. Drapion V is mostly in here to counter Mew VMAX, because that is otherwise quite a difficult matchup to race against, so having this little basic V Pokemon that can uptrade into a VMAX is definitely going to bring the matchup closer. Cross Switcher is the other key change in the deck list. I mentioned reducing the count of Boss's Orders, and that's because we much prefer using Irida throughout the game, as well as Melanie. So when we're committing to these sorts of supporter cards, we of course can't gust in the same turn unless we use this new item card, Cross Switcher. The Cross Switcher has to be used 2 in one go, but it allows us to switch your opponent's bench with their active, and we also switch our own. This is another great card that makes the Mew much more effective. If we go into a turn knowing that we want to attempt to gust our opponent, you can lead the Mew in the active position, get some value with Mysterious Tail, and look to try and find Cross Switcher plus Irida combos very easily. The Irida is the main supporter that makes this Cross Switcher so strong in the deck, because it means that unlike getting the diminishing returns of just finding more ball search in the mid-game with your Iridas, you can just grab Cross Switchers and have more power spikes. That means that we have a new starting point here where we have increased the counts of our Palkia V and V-Star. It is our main attacker, so we're going to add in an additional copy of each of those. As you can see, I've substituted the Bidoof in and out, and we've also added some new basic Pokemon just to help us, again, go wide with our subspace swell. We often want a really full bench if we can help it, and these V Pokemon and the new Mew are all very helpful. The cross switches are massive items for this deck, and it is one of the biggest boasts of playing Irida in the first place. And the combination of Judge and these new Stadium cards should really help us stabilize against Lost Zone box players, which I think is definitely something worth doing in the current format. I have also constructed a second build, which is only very slightly different from the one I've just talked about, and this one includes 3 copies of Path to the Peak. Path to the Peak is one of the strongest stadiums in the game right now, and there are a number of decks which like to utilize it, and there does seem to be a bit of internal anti-synergy going on here, because we have such great abilities from Radiant Greninja and Palkia, which would be both shut off by this Path to the Peak. However, this is a really helpful card against Gardevoir EX and Mew, even though we are playing Drapion, again, a minor anti-synergy going on here. So trying to keep track of your stadium and make sure you still have Lost Cities to bounce at certain times is going to be really important here. Ultimately, I think that Path to the Peak plus Judge and Roxanne are such big power spikes that it gives this deck a lot of great comeback potential, which it doesn't have with the previous build. Also, to supplement the very high stadium count, and also accepting that there will be moments in games when Radiant Greninja won't be available to draw us cards, I've also added in a Squovert here, which has the Nest Stash ability, which works really well in combination with our Bibarel for just allowing us to cycle through cards and see more throughout the game. You can see that I've cut the Trekking Shoes and reduced the Boss's Orders count to 1 here, as well as cutting the Collapsed Stadium. I think this one is also really worth trying out, because I do think Path to the Peak and Judge as a combination can be absolutely vicious. We've seen it with Mew, VMAX, we've seen it with Arceus decks. Leaning into this core strategy is very helpful, definitely against Lugia players, Gardevoir players, and even Mew players as well. Also worth trying, and I think interesting to experiment with if you're looking to sort of broaden your horizons with this deck, are going to be a few of the options on screen right now. The Ice Rider Calyrex is definitely a powerful VMAX Pokemon that we can lean into, and I think if you want to make the most out of this card, you might need to re-include the copies of Choice Belt so you can reach 280 damage, and possibly even Fan of Waves. It's an item card that allows us to remove a special energy from our opponents, so this could be a great way around V-Guard energy, so that Ice Rider Calyrex can be instantly knocking out V-Star Pokemon. In the bottom right of your screen, there's the Articuno and Raihan mini package. I feel like these cards go hand in hand to make the most out of it. Otherwise, you have to wait until your V-Star power, until the opportune moment with your Articuno, which doesn't always come up. So having Raihan in here, possibly in place of a Melanie or another one of your supporter cards, could be a really good choice. Having a Paralysis option can be very dangerous with this Wild Freeze, and could be another great way for us to deal with multi-prize Pokemon that we cannot knock out in one hit. We can simply try and paralyze them with a single prize Pokemon in the active to maybe buy a turn for free against them, or even if they do find a means around paralysis, they're only taking a single prize knockout, and we can come in and finish them off with a Palkia VSTAR. In the top of your screen, we have a really fun combo, which I think is definitely worth exploring if you're into having a good bit of fun on the ladder. The Tempting Tune combination of allowing you to put a supporter to the top of your deck works really well alongside Squovert for the exact effect of Mustard, which can only be used if it's the only card in your hand. So Squovert stashes all your other cards to the bottom after you've used a Tempting Tune to put Mustard on top of your deck. Then you simply draw the Mustard, play it immediately, and get a Inteleon directly onto your bench from your discard pile. The Quick Shooting ability was a really powerful combination pre-rotation, when we had some slightly better Sobble and Drizzile at our disposal, and it was one of the reasons why Palkia was so strong in the past. So adding back Quick Shooting into the deck list, in a slightly different iteration from the past, could be a great way to once again improve this deck's damage output and make it slightly more aggressive. Finally, another reason why I feel like this is such a great purchase for players who are just getting into the game is because I believe a number of cards in this deck still remain very powerful and actually are improving by the time we get Paldea Evolved. Paldea Evolved introduces the Chien-Pao Baxcalibur deck, and they're going to be also relying on this Irida engine with Battle VIP Pass. There are a ton of builds out there which are still using Palkia V and V-Star as a backup attacker, and giving the deck a V-Star power option, and there are a number of decks that are also playing with Barrel. So there's many elements of the deck that you can simply add into the new Chien-Pao Baxcalibur deck if you're enjoying the Pokemon trading card game, dipping your toe in, and wanting to get more engrossed in this format and sort of move along with the changing metagame. There's even an EX battle deck coming out with Chien-Pao that releases on the 14th of July, so that could be another thing to earmark in your calendar if you're still enjoying the Pokemon trading card game and want to upgrade your deck list. I hope you enjoyed today's video, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.